are just immortal beings in small bodies. They need to be held responsible like the rest of us.
Promise to help get ethics in on this planet and universe, which is the basic purpose of the Sea Org.
You need to stop committing these overts. This better not come up in your next session.
I promise to accept and fulfill to the utmost of my ability the responsibilities entrusted to me, whatever they may be, and wherever they may carry me in the line of duty.
I don't want to hear it. Write up your OWs.
I promise through my actions to increase the power of the Sea Org and decrease the power of any enemy.
You can't just leave.
Protecting the church is more important than family.
Welcome back to the Children of Scientology channel. I'm Christi Gordon, and I'm joined by my partner, Mirriam Francis, both raised in Scientology, as we continue exploring and exposing Scientology for children. Today, we continue our Cadet Org series, which is a look back at what it was like to be born in or trafficked into Scientology's Sea organization as a child, given no options or safe off-ramp. Once there, your only future is to be hammered into an asset and a future Sea Org member for 1 billion years. Trigger warning, we are discussing trauma in various forms, so if you need to pause this video and pick it back up later, please do so. On behalf of all children raised in Scientology, we appreciate you being here and helping us spread the message that Scientology is not appropriate for children. Scientology does not believe in childhood. This is dangerous.
Maybe this is a good place to kind of segue into me moving from PAC, which is that Pacific Area Command in LA or Hollywood, and then we moved to the Castile Canyon School. Sterling and I have talked about this, Sterling Tompkins, and he and I have talked a little bit about what it was like growing up in PAC as a kid. And it's a very crime-ridden area there in around that little complex area. You have a lot of, gang violence in that area. There's drugs in that area. There's, all sorts. There's a homelessness issue. There's a lot of socioeconomic problems.
Right. There were people being murdered. Like it was a regular thing. I remember, they were like, oh, no one can go over to Wendy's because Wendy's was the burger joint that was right near the ATA. And they're like, no one can go over to Wendy's anymore. Not that we were, but they were saying like, you can't go with your parents if you ever did. Because someone had just gotten stabbed at Wendy's. But it was normal. I remember outside the Wilcox where I stayed, which was near Hollywood, it was just, it was prostitution, homelessness, and just
a lot of inner
middle of
city
the night.
issues. Right.
Yeah, middle of the night, someone's getting stabbed under the street light across from the Wilcox. Just like
LA sucked. And like the concrete jungle, there's no nature, there's nothing, there's a lot that was bad about that. So we were all moved up here. And I think the main driving force to establish this was Bitty Miscavige, who is Jenna Miscavige's mother. She was in a position where she was handling a lot of the renovations projects, like the Free Winds, flag renovations, you name it. CC.
What was her post?
She was a project op. She was between RTC and CMO INT on special project operator, I think is what she was doing. But she was one of these executives that held a lot of power in Scientology. I think she even does similar stuff now that she's out of Scientology and out of the Sea Org. This woman is a powerhouse. She's a kind of the project manager. You can like give her a problem and like a solution will shoot out the other end. And she just doggedly works stuff. She's a businesswoman. So there was a shooting or something that had occurred down in LA. And the ranch thing was already getting going. So when Jenna Miscavige and Benjamin Rinder were kind of moved up overnight, it's because there was a shooting that happened in LA. The school wasn't ready. It was just 8 of us kids that were up there. They were kind of supposed to be going through our EPF. We weren't yet EPF complete, which is that boot camp for Sea Org members. And then they brought us up here to this property, which is on the other side of the Saboba Indian Reservation. It's about a 15-minute drive from Gilman Hot Springs, which is where the international base of Scientology management was located. And also the Golden Era Productions film studio is located there. It's in Riverside County, Hemet San Jacinto area. But this property that they have, you have to drive through an Indian reservation. This is an American Indian reservation. They're called the Saboba Indians. past their casino, through all of their living property to get to this property. And then on the far sides of it, you have massive mountain ranges that go all the way out towards Palm Springs. It is very inaccessible except through the Indian reservation. So the property itself is very secluded, which, you know, it was a decent enough property. It's kind of in the high desert of California. Anyone that's been to Southern California, you'll know it's kind of a semi-arid um area that is extremely hot in the summertime. It gets a lot of rains and mudslides in the winter. It's not a horrible place to live, but at the same time, it is pretty hot. You're like in high desert area, and that's why you can see kind of a lot of cactus and stuff that we have, because there's some stuff just literally won't grow in that area. So they decided we're going to make this ranch, and this was the first ranch for them to start. And then within a year or two is when they started to create the pack ranch. I think the ranch project started in like March of 1989 is when the first 8 of us were moved up there, and we were all around the ages of about between 12 and 14 years old. I think I was about 13 at the time. And we were chosen not necessarily because of who our parents were, but because we were of an age where we could do work. So if you had kids who were very much younger than that, they would be not able to do manual labor very efficiently. Some of the names of who was on that were very senior executives' children, like Justin Miscavige, Justin Tompkins. I think Taryn Rinder. We all know Taryn because of the shenanigans that she's now doing for the Stan League and all that. But that's Mike Rinder's daughter. But she's about the same age as I am. We all grew up together, and then a bunch of other kids, but we were the first ones there. And then as soon as like this situation in Los Angeles was continuing to be problematic, they just, as we renovated a living space, they then moved more and more and more kids up to it. And then we kind of plugged them in. And then as the younger kids arrived, that they were then, you know, got to do kind of the labor as well, which, if anyone hasn't read this book, Jenna Miscavige, she has an amazing book. It's called Beyond Belief. And where she details a lot of what it was like as a young girl working at this ranch. And this is when she went up there, she was probably 7 or 8 years old. So she was quite young. And then, but then us older kids were now, kind of teenagers. For us, 13 to 14 years old. From being in Los Angeles to now just not having any school responsibilities and just working in renovations up at this kind of remote property. At first, it was pretty amazing. At first it was,
I can understand that.
awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
But like anything,
Mike,
it
because
is,
I also have the same feeling of like going from the ATA AB situation at PAC to going to the PAC ranch. The PAC ranch in a lot of ways, though it was some same structures, but the environment was completely different, and it made a huge difference. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. So you're
For
kind
me,
of,
it was.
you're out of the
Mhm.
city. There's not that city threat. So,
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about being mugged, attacked, someone, like that. You're not surrounded by concrete and the smell of inner city plight. You were
Or
out
worried
kind of in the
about roaches
wilderness.
crawling. Yeah, I mean, I used to pull my blanket over my head so that the roaches wouldn't crawl into my ear. And when you get up in the middle of the night because you had to go for a pee, like you'd just be terrified because as soon as you switch that light on, it was like
It's like,
thousands of cockroaches. Yeah, these
oh,
were
I
the
remember
little
the same
tiny
thing.
ones, and they just would. Yeah,
And
it
then you
was
get those big
wild.
ass palmetto bugs, the ones that like look like they're like chase you out
They
of the,
do. They
like,
fly at you. They fly
oh,
at you. They'll,
they're terrifying.
Yeah.
yeah.
And also the thing is that the colors in nature have a really profound effect on the brain. And as a child, especially, you really need that. And we didn't have that. All the colors were gray, and then there was the blue buildings, but that was it. It was just everything was gray, 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 gray.
Right. There was
And
not
then
nature, there was not animals, there was not a lot of the positive things that you get from a country lifestyle. We had none of that when we were in the
Mhm.
city.
Right. So you've got sight, smell, sound, all of these senses that were not being stimulated, as we would like to see in like the nurturing of a child. Or yeah, so this environment, like for me, it was great. Fresh air, space to run around. I wasn't at the ranch; I was at the pack ranch, but space to run around. You know, yeah, a sense of adventure. And also, I was reading Louis. I was started reading Louis L'Amour books at some stage of being at the pack
Mhm.
ranch, and so that was really cool because it's really like that sort of like pioneering and Western, feel and adventure and stuff like that. And like, I could just imagine, so it lent itself to creativity. Would be writing and, poetry and drawing and, the art sort of, because your brain's a bit more stimulated.
Inspiration. Yeah, inspiration.
There was
Can I ask you guys, it was very different between Pack Ranch and INT Ranch. Like I understand that INT Ranch was incredibly controlled to the policy letter, like no sugar, no anything. I don't know. Were you allowed to listen to music or read books that weren't Scientology? Could you?
I remember we could listen to music, and I think,
Mm,
like all things, the way that it started and the way that it ended up, there was a lot of difference.
mm,
Because the reason
Yeah,
is
I
like
agree.
there was the potential for this to be amazing. They could have done
mm,
great things, but the biggest problem that they had was that it was a Scientology Sea Org run facility. And
mm.
the best analogy I can come
Yeah.
up with, like, hey, it would have been great if it wasn't in fucking Scientology. So, but
Totally.
like when you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Mhm.
Like, that's all
Yeah.
it's gonna be. So, they could take the best situation possible, which is what happened here, and then it's going to turn into like, it
Mm,
could have
mhm,
just been an area like, "Hey, you know what? Let's get in some professionals, figure out a good curriculum, and actually come up with a syllabus so that we can train these kids so that they have
Mhm.
a legitimate, like, education. And then we can also
Mhm.
do all the Scientology, like, brainwashing shit on the side." Like, they could have done it
Mhm.
all, but they had no desire to do that because you gotta understand, Bitty Miscavige, Janice Grady, the people that were kind of the instruments that were kind of the executives putting these things in place, their upbringing was from the Apollo. So they were indoctrinated as children in a Scientology lifestyle. So they don't have any value for a normal educational profile
Mhm.
themselves. So when they're in charge of making sure one exists, it's going to fit whatever Hubbard said to do. They were kind of young kids in their early teens, maybe, and then they arrived on the ship. They were either messengers or working in the management structure or in the
right.
engine room, and like they were on the Apollo, and that was their formative years were in the Sea
Mm,
Organization. So
gotcha.
they got their education or lack thereof, or their skill sets and a very tenacious problem solving, fixed, like dedicated drive, which all of these individuals have. They learn that
Mhm,
from a very young age as being indoctrinated.
Like as we came up through the 90s, heading towards the 2000s, and laws came in, more protective laws came in for children, I think it just became unviable because what you have is that you've got LRH policy that needs to be applied. If it's not written, it's not true. So their guidebook for how to raise children, number one was the same laws that apply to men and women also apply to children. Now that is not legal. That is in fact illegal. And so I think that's where they were really more and more sort of like, on that, yeah, they could be in a lot of deep shit and often were on that verge. Is
mhm,
mentioned through these references of that they had violated codes and they now needed to do this because they'd been pulled up on such and such. And so I think just eventually it's like it really could not reconcile, the system could not reconcile the upbringing of children in such a harsh, detached, hard, unforgiving, discompassionate environment, which is what L. Ron Hubbard had intended for the children. And it just no longer was viable because
Yeah.
it just isn't right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
mhm.
I think this is a course room. I want to say this is probably the Pack Ranch, but
It
our
is.
courses were very similar. But it's the
That's what
same
I
kind of
thought.
thing.
Yeah.
The only difference up at the Ant Ranch is I think at one of the course rooms had a painting, which actually I'm pretty sure that Miriam's mom was one of the ones working on it. One had the
Oh,
Apollo and the other one had the free ones. But the artists
mhm,
came out and they painted murals on the walls and stuff. But yeah, this is the profile of what the kids were taught was they would be taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're supposed to have a
Mhm.
vocabulary of up to 10,000 words, be able to write swiftly, legibly, and elegantly, and then be able to do basic arithmetic, which if anyone, arithmetic is basic math. We're talking addition,
Yeah.
subtraction, multiplication, and division, to include some navigational things, which I think were important on the ship, but they still had it like
mhm,
degrees, minutes, and seconds. Like, okay, map reader
mhm,
people, like if you're going to navigate up on the bridge, I guess that's important. But that's it. There was
And
no
also-
other profile for that.
Can you please telex that to me? Because I would like to have it later.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Exactly.
Christi, can you just click back to that course room again? I just wanted to point out a couple things. So this is a Scientology course room, and we know that because we've got a stack of dictionaries in the middle of each table that's very deliberately put there. We also have this little plastic kind of container, and that's actually supposed to be a demo kit.
Demo kit.
That looks empty, but that's demo kit. So we're already demonstrating the use of L. Ron Hubbard's study technology. I mean, this was obviously a photo that was set up. Often what they would have to do is do like these compliance reports, like, yes, we are conforming with L. Ron Hubbard. So this is like a prime example of that. Okay, let's show them that study tech is in use by showing the
And then up
dictionary
on the
demo
wall,
kit. Yes.
and then up on the wall, you have the Bridge to Total Freedom on the left, and then you have the Scientology emotional tone scale on the right.
Correct.
It goes from total failure, below body death, all the way up, talking about how bad it is to be a victim, up to body death, and then all this sort of stuff. You're indoctrinating these children that the path to their future is on the left, which is that Scientology Bridge to Total Freedom, which will tap out at OT8 because Hubbard, wasn't able to crank out any more crazy before he died. And then all of the emotional tone scale on how to be a dysfunctional idiot when it comes to handling emotions.
100%.
So that's
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
summary. That's awesome. Yeah, I love it.
This is definitely the INT Ranch because we built a lot of this stuff. So this is about halfway through the room. You're going to see another set of bunk beds would be behind the one that's not in the photo. So you would have between 8 to 10 kids that would be in a room. Some of these rooms would be able to be set up to go 3 high. So you could put a third bunk up. But this is the way that we did it. We had to have the hospital corners and all the stuff. And this was what you would have in a typical room. This renovations and these improvements and stuff were being made by the kids, which was, I learned a lot. Everything that I'm quite good at doing construction work and around the house. My wife's like, hey, we should hire somebody to do that because you don't even have time to do this other stuff. And I'm like, no, I can dig it. I promise you I can. She's like, but the what's disingenuous about this photo is the little elements of humanity that have been put into it. You have
The flowers and stuffed
flowers,
animals.
a rubber
Yeah.
duck, and then you have stuffed animals. Most of that stuff was not allowed to be kept on beds. Like that is a no-go. Like it is 100% militaristic. And I don't remember stuffed animals being kept on beds at all. So I think this is
I don't
for
remember us having stuffed animals at the pack ranch either.
yeah.
Also,
Oh, yeah.
Mirriam said she had no aircon, and she noted that you had aircon, which means air conditioning. Apparently. Okay.
Yeah, we're kind of a big deal up at the INT Ranch. It's just letting you know.
I know, fancy.
Slumming it.
I was going to say something back at that picture. Sorry. Did you ever have to do, Mike? Did you ever have to do the how to make a bed check sheet?
Didn't
I
everyone?
might have wrote how to make a bed check sheet. No, yeah, absolutely. We had to do that, like how to make your bed. They would have room inspections. You'd get in trouble if you didn't have the hospital corners. Everything had to, this is this is how soldiers are expected to have their beds made when they go through basic training or when they're in dormitories or barracks. So yeah, it was very, very much like that.
Yeah, so there was a series of these like basic check sheets that were given to the children, and I remember doing this at about 7, 8 years old. And one of them was how to make a bed check sheet. There was a check sheet for everything, and then there was like personal hygiene check sheet, and that was so that you could learn how to look after yourself, like clip your own fingernails. I know that was on there, and then the cadets, because I was a child then. But the cadets would come through and like make sure you were doing it correctly and, check off your check sheet and stuff like that. Yeah, so that was a part of
Children raising
childhood.
children.
I have
100%.
two things.
Yeah.
Can I add two things? One, that I was just reading this like success stories of people that were applying child Dianetics and whatever. And there was this nanny saying, oh, I had a conversation with my children in the nursery the other day, and I was able to clear up a false datum that they had, which was that I was there to care for them. And I clarified that I was there to teach them to care for themselves. And she's talking about 3 and 4-year-olds. Like that was her job, to teach them to care for themselves and each other, period. And once she cleared up that false datum, they just went into power change and began caring for each other. And I was just like, The other thing is, I feel like that one of the check sheets we also did was also the window cleaning, where they used the needle,
Oh,
the
yeah.
newsprint, and the vinegar and water and whatever. But because children or cadets were in charge of keeping public spaces clean, like that was one of our main duties.
Like
Was
common areas? Is that what you
Yeah, I
mean?
mean, we just go. So I was at Flag. I was at Melrose at Pack first, the Melrose
Mhm.
building, Cadet Org, and then we went to Flag Cadet Org. And so the thing that we were constantly required to be responsible for was keeping public spaces clean. And so
Mhm.
yes, we had to make our beds, of course, as well.
Mhm.
But we had to clean windows and
Yeah.
squeegee floors and clean mirrors and glass and whatever there was to it. And so I feel like those are the things that we were taught: how to keep stats, how to stat
Mhm.
our graphs and all that stuff, and also keep things
And
clean.
remember the local organizations for the cadet orgs and pack, they would do these little missions, which is the little like filing or cleaning and all
Mhm.
that. And then they were required to then give money to the cadet organization
Mhm.
based
Mhm.
off of those missions or the work that was being done. And they would use that money to then buy toiletries or toilet paper or food. All that money wouldn't go to the kids. It
Mhm.
would go to then like
Yeah,
The
like
care
the
of
care
them.
for the kids. Yeah. So they were
financial
being
planning.
made to pay for their own way
Own
in that
care.
way as children.
So Matt Pesh, Amy Scobie's husband, I was not. I didn't. You know, you're in the cadet org, you're just immersed in it. You don't realize like the bigger picture of things. But he worked in financial planning, and it was I forget what the hell he was at Flag, like a
Treasury
FLV
secretary
or
or something.
something like treasure, like yeah, something. And anyways, so he was explaining to us, oh yeah, the cadet missions were for hire. They were orgs would pay you to come in and do their shredding, to come in and clean
Mhm.
their spaces, to come in and do their filing. And then that money went back to the FP number 1 for the cadet org, which basically was just overhead for the cadet org. It didn't have anything to do with you getting paid or earning something or whatever, but it was
You
just like,
you may or may not get new clothes if you work hard. That
no.
might be
Mhm.
like your compensation would be the clothes on your back if you work hard enough. Eventually, that's what it would come to. Anyway, yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
This is most definitely the Ant Ranch. This is us planting apple trees, or citrus trees. I think they're apple trees. The girl in the bottom right is either one of two people. That is either Jenna or that is
Mm.
Laura.
Hmm.
No.
Anyway, little blonde girl. They appear
Mm.
multiple photos in here, but yeah, this is we're this is they had a project going on at the international base, which Hubbard had a lot of. He was a doomsday guy. That's why the whole CST, Church Spiritual Technology, preserve all my psychotic ramblings in bomb-proof shelters and all this sort of stuff, so that humanity, if everyone finds this,
Titanium. Yeah.
yeah, that
Mhm.
Scientology can be recreated by whatever, roaches are left to be in L. Ron Hubbard's image. But along with that, he had similar advices for the international base
Mm.
that there would be gardening that the kids would do. So once
Mm.
renovations were complete, the kids were basically started to then be used for, harvesting crops and things. So there's a lot of potential there for good. Let
Mm.
me be clear about this, because there's a lot of kids that grow up in the country, they work on farms and all this sort of stuff, and it's their family's business. Again, you have this thing which is called the parent, and then it's the
Mhm.
family, and they all work
Mhm.
together, and then it's
Yeah.
like it's part of the wholesome lifestyle that they have.
Mhm.
Here, this was part of the structure of the organization where the kids were taught probably skills, but it was whether they wanted to or not. And a lot of kids this was in lieu of proper education. They would be being used to really do agriculture in order to create food for the organization to offset their financial burden. And I think that
Mhm.
that was a lot of what was so the money that would be saved for fresh fruits and vegetables would then not have to be money that they would have to spend in the financial planning. And that's one of the ways they were able to get the meal cost so incredibly low. And on the Blown for Good site, Mark Headley's talked a lot about how like they had gotten down each meal to a ridiculously low level. Part of the way in terms of actual financial cost, quality of the food
Mhm.
wasn't great, but it was being supplemented a lot by the fruits and vegetables that were being created by the kids out at this property. There's
Which is
again a
wild.
lot of potential for good, but at the same time, if it's being handled in a very like do this or else kind of way, you're not going to have positive mentorship experiences or life learning that's going to go on there. I don't know how many of these kids this would be the test for this. How many of the kids that grew up as farmers on this property have continued in the agricultural field after they left? I will,
None. I don't
you
know
know what I mean?
any.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
you know what's
when
funny?
you hear these,
Yeah. What's funny is that, so this website where we've taken this photo, where Christy's taken this photo from, and this little, I want to read this quote. It was taken from the Castile Canyon website, which was created as a result of Jenna Miscavige's book. And so it was like their PR piece. And so they're only showing you really what they want to present to you. But there are some testimonials from former students there. I use that term loosely, but former cadets, basically. And what you will not see, like you just touched on, what you will not see is any of them say anything about the education that they receive, the quality of education. What you will see is that I learned how to work hard. And this little quote here is, this is what it says. It says, I learned a lot about exchange and high quality, meticulous performance of duty. Those lessons go a long way in life in any line of duty. Sure, because you're being prepared
EOH.
for a line
Sounds
of
like
duty.
Brendan O'Hare is what I'm guessing that might be. Although OH is, that's probably Brendan O'Hare, which is one of his mother's in RTC and his father was in gold. But yeah, you weren't talking about that. But again, the families that raise their children as dairy farmers or doing agriculture stuff, that's the family business. Most of those kids inherit a multi-million-dollar ranch, and that's what they do. Is they do farming or agriculture in some way. So it's not an unknown part of life, but
they benefit
these
personally
children,
from it.
correct, absolutely.
Right.
And then they have then it's not like, hey, when y'all grow up, you can actually have this here olive orchard. Like, no, this is just Scientology shit they're going to sell back to the Saboba Indians at some. So anyway, I think it's a disingenuous thing to say, look at all the life skills they learned. I mean, yes and no, but I'm going to lean more towards not so much.
Yeah.
They learned how to work. Can I tell you, so most of these shots that they had on that website, and I think a lot of the shots that actually were captured, there's a few exceptions, were compliance photos or PR photos, obviously, right? They were taken because they were going to put them on a website,
Yes.
like Jenna's doing ballet or painting a beautiful picture. Look, Jenna's lying. She had a beautiful life, blah, blah, blah. But also what you don't see is anyone talking about their relationship with their family. Like there's no family. It's so completely absent, with the exception of, we see on Facebook, there's a pack ranch group that's public and I stumbled into. And there's a poor kid writing like a weekly report, and he's just going, I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. I can't wait to see you. I'm doing great. My stats are up. I'm really productive. But it's not like he's getting to see his dad. It's just like he's just trying to write some uptone, thoughtful beta thing to his dad in hopes that his dad might come to see him. And it's just, it's incredibly sad. And I'll also say there's nothing wrong with children learning how to work. It's fine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't mean like,
so long as
full-time
that's not the
jobs.
only thing they're doing. Yeah.
Well, but I don't mean like full-time jobs. I mean learning about their future so that when they're older, they can contribute and all these things. But I just feel like the way that it's done, the way that it's enforced, that children must exchange equally as adults, basically. Yeah. And that meant that we got child labor. Like even when I wasn't in the Sea Org, my mom expected us to pay the rent and pay for our own food and pay for our own clothes. And that was really common with public kids. And I know that, it was different in the Sea Org, but exchange was a different thing in the Sea Org. But that principle was really heavy to kids, that you should exchange equally. And that is not a good lesson for children.
Because it shows that the care, compassion, and the safety net for them is conditional upon their servitude. And that's how it felt. Like you need 100%. To work in order to earn your way along here. And for all the these sort of activities, I believe the kids should have the opportunity to do that as extracurricular activities, meaning like,
totally.
Hey, your age, you're going to learn how to do these things or whatever it is, as long as it's their interest. And it shouldn't be jammed down their throat as an extracurricular unless that's your family's lifestyle. And then guess what? I need those pig pens cleaned. Like that's what we're doing. And then, and I'm guessing that the kid actually gets pretty well taken care of, but all of our day-to-day was contingent upon us doing a job. And that's, you know, we were forced, like a work ethic was required from a very, very young age. Where I will tell you
Everything.
that is not normal. You
No.
shouldn't have your very small children, their love is contingent upon their work. The love that they
Every.
get is contingent upon how hard they work. The other thing that I thought was a thing that I want to highlight in terms of the relationship with children to parents is, I know I did this. As children, we are prone to magical thinking, but at the same time, we will elevate our parents up to a higher level than in our minds, because we want that same. We want to know that that person is an amazing person. They're there for us. We will create this picture in our mind about probably that our parent is better than they actually were in the organization. Like
Correct.
that, saying, "I love you, dad. I'm doing all this great stuff." In his mind, he's thinking like, "My dad's such a hardworking SEERG member. He loves me so much." And
Mhm.
those things probably aren't true. But at the same time, I think that there is some responsibility that our parents have as absentee parents. And as
Mhm.
children, we wanted to not necessarily look at that. I know I wanted to elevate my mother and my father and to not hold them in the regard that I can now kind of look at it as, is like, "Hey, you guys were not there when you should have been." And that
Mhm.
was one of the biggest issues.
Mhm.
Mike, I so wholeheartedly agree with everything you just laid out there. And I think that was so well said. And for me, like, I definitely had that. I think the thing is that, like you said, like, you want to feel safe, and feeling safe, you have to believe that your parents know what they're doing, know what the hell they're doing. Cause otherwise shit's going to fall apart. If they don't know what they're doing, then you know what I mean? So there's that survival, that need to survive and to believe that everything's okay. But I definitely had my mother up on a high pedestal, thinking she was absolutely amazing. You know, she was this talented artist, you know, and her paintings were in the Life exhibition, and we were being toured through there, you know, like, um, at least like at one stage, it was like once a week for a while. And so, she would just was like such a hero in my mind. And then coming into adulthood, like, oh, yeah, no, like, I didn't even know the woman. I barely saw her. I had a handful of conversations, and those conversations were so wild, like, so crazy, the shit she would say to me, and so damaging. Like, yeah, so yeah,
There's a lot
anyways,
there. So,
there's a lot. Yeah.
yeah. So when I was 15 out at the ranch, I was either the CO cadets or I was one of the executive cadets for whatever that's worth. They're all made up bullshit things, but I was in the cadet org, and it was told to me, my father is, again, as we talked about, he's a public Scientologist at this point, not in the Sea organization. My mother is working for Ronnie Miscavige Jr. as
Mhm.
marketing executive international secretary. So
Mm.
I'm up at the international base, but I would be required to go and visit my father basically a couple weeks a year as a vacation. That was like the custody agreement that my parents came up with. So, and yeah, this is a picture of me at the ranch with some of our dogs. Um, and you can see, this is up before a lot of the renovations were complete. We turned it into a very beautiful property. I think
Mhm.
on Laura's page, she actually does a walkthrough of the way that it looks now, and it's very green and lush. And but
Mhm.
this is
Mhm.
before a lot of that grounds work was done. The schoolhouse is up there on the right corner, but um, around this age, maybe a year, yeah. And there's a picture of my mother and I. This is probably when I'm about 15 years old. So this is about the age that I was when I had decided I was told, like, "Hey, your friends are all going and they're graduating the cadet org." So around the age of
Mhm.
15, they're being sent to the Ent base to work there, and you are not. And the main reason why is because you're going and visiting your father. As a SEER member, you can't do
Mhm.
that. You can't just take leave to go and visit your father because you're a child. Like, you need to deal
Mhm.
with him about this. You need to make it so you're not going to go anymore. So go on your vacation with your dad, and when you come back, you're going to be expected to not do that anymore. So you have to handle your dad, which is a
So
real weird ass
handle your
thing to do.
dad. Right. So, Mike, handle your dad on not requiring you to visit him anymore. Basically,
Mhm.
to just completely annihilate your relationship with him, right? That's what they were asking of you.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I always want my mother helped me get this bike, but that's a whole nother story, which I'm going to do with Sterling at some point. It's going to be a fun one. But anyway,
but there's a policy per LRH that you get an annual leave, and that was always the case on the ship and forward. And so they're basically at a certain point saying, "Oh, annual leaves are not okay. They're downstat. They're a distraction. They're off purpose. They're
that
what is you first dynamic oriented? Are you being second dynamic oriented? Like they're starting to punish you and stigmatize you for wanting this thing that was always promised to you, which was to be able to take a vacation once a year
to visit your
Right.
family. And then
Yeah.
along with that, the problem I think they also saw was my mother's working for this executive who is the brother of David Miscavige. And they saw my going and visiting my father as an external threat or
Influence.
influence.
Yeah.
So they wanted to deal with that, and they couldn't have me posted at INT and then have this family member out. Like the idea is if you take leave or you're going to do something, you're going to kind of do your own thing. Maybe like it's very unclear, but if you ever kind of have this connection with family, that is very frowned upon. And up at INT, if you had an external influence, and again, my father, his background, military officer, former security clearance, he, had not not a great Scientologist, probably a really shitty Scientologist, and somebody that probably would complain about things. And so they were concerned about that. So their solution was to send me to go handle it, which at the end of that trip, I confided in more my stepmom than my father. Was like, I'm getting a real crap education. I felt as the years ticked by and as I got older and older and older, I realized that I had not progressed since I was that 10-year-old kid that got brought into the Sea organization. And I'm now 15 years old. And I really am still sitting there with that 5th grade level education. Like I hadn't really progressed on. Like I'm good at construction work now and I understand fractions because I know how to do like framing construction work, not because we were being trained to do mathematics or that we were good at science or any of the normal stuff. So I felt intimidated by the future proposition of having to be a functioning adult. And I think that is kind of what they want you to have as the mindset when you're this cadet. So you will go and work for them. So I told my dad I wanted to leave. I want to join the military when I grow up. I want to be a helicopter pilot. I want to do all this stuff when I was a kid. This is what I want to do. And they're like, okay, well, and I really don't think my father much gave a shit about it as much as my stepmom, who was very supportive of me. It's another woman that my father married who's wonderful. It's not the woman he left us for. So my father kind of moves around on relationships, but now he's with my stepmom and my stepmom's great. So she was supportive. Hey, come and live with us. I'm going to help you. We're going to get you caught up. We're going to get you a high school education. Whatever you want to do, we're going to do this. And I think my father was going along with it more than anything. So they're like, do you want to just stay? And me being indoctrinated, I was like, I don't want to lose my mother. I don't want to get in a situation where I'm a suppressive person. I'm getting disconnected from. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to route out. I'm going to go back and do their process to leave, which is you go
I'm
back.
going to do the
security
quote
job.
right thing. I'm going
I'm
to
going to
do
do the right
is-
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I arrived back at 15 and a half, almost 16 years old and trying to do the right thing. And I was like, hey, I want to leave. I want to go and live with my dad. This is why I'm here to kind of wrap this up. And I was told, you will be isolated from the rest of the group. We don't want you spreading the fact you don't want to be here because it's very much Scientology policy. You are not allowed to communicate about leaving Scientology to anyone. It is considered a suppressive act. So I was isolated. I was put on heavy manual labor. I'm talking ditch digging in the desert. We're talking ditches that probably should have been being dug by backhoes. And I was doing that and then being sec checked. People
Basically,
leave
when you're
their
in
own-
doubt and you're leaving because you have overs and withholds.
Yep. So it's not because I had my own dreams and aspirations. It's because I have overs and withholds. And then they also wanted to put me through this type of auditing. It's called the INT rundown, which is the exteriorization rundown. The whole idea is when you exteriorize from your body, like, out of body experience, it'll make you so that you're having problems. And they figured that was why. So they're putting me through the Scientology process, which is very introspective. It's asking you questions about, they assess these lists and then they ask you a question. It's like, can you recall a time you went in, want to go in, can't get in, pushed out of spaces, being trapped? And it's like, okay, can you remember the time you're being trapped? You're like, well, I'm fucking stuck here right now. Like, I want to leave. So this went on for, between the isolation, the heavy manual labor and everything, this went on for the better part of a year and a half. I was about 17 and a half years old by the time I was then pulled into a room and kind of hard sold, regged, yelled at in order to be like, you're almost 18 years old. What are you going to do? You have no education. You need to join this group. You need to like get on board. And at the same time, I had then fallen kind of, I had a thing for this girl. Her name is Samantha, probably still is. I thought that, hey, maybe I can make a life here. I'm just going to decide to stay. So I was in the closest analogy that I can come up with. It's almost like a POW style situation where I was isolated, made to do heavy manual labor, and heavily indoctrinated for the better part of a year and a half. It was horrible. And then at the end of that, I finally was programmed enough to be able to realize like I have to do something good for myself in order to be part of this group. But the main thing that I decided that I had to latch onto was this person that I had fallen for, which was Samantha, a girl about my age. And I'm like, I'm going to try to make a life with this person. And she was also a Sea Org member, or she was a cadet. She was going to be a Sea Org member, but her mother was a high class auditor. Her father was John Travolta's auditor from CC. Um, Rena Weinberg, who's the head of the basically all the Scientology secular activities, and one of the presidents of Scientology's ABLE, Association for Better Living and Education. That's her cousin. So she's very deeply rooted into this. And she kind of went through a similar thing of not really wanting to be there and had decided to stay. So I decided to stay too. And then at that point, I would consider myself very, very deeply indoctrinated and a hardworking Scientology Sea Org member, result of the cadet organization, where I was willing to work for that organization no matter what and be 100% in. And
Well, they had worked you over for a year and a half, like hammering you and molding you specifically for that, so that you would give up those other intentions.
right.
But could we talk about, so you said you did the INT rundown. Yeah. Did you do
And a
false
lot of sex
purpose
checking.
rundown, PTS handling, rollback,
Lots of PTS
black
handling,
PR
fallbacks, black
stuff?
PR. It was all being done by either security guards or a sec checker. So it was all being done by.
Which is basically, we're going to take the thing that you think and get you to agree that you don't think that it's based on something someone told you that's false. It's based on some crime that you committed. It's based on some misunderstanding that you had. And so I was just reading someone's success story from the Truth Rundown, and it's so disturbing to me. She's like, I'm so glad that weight is lifted from these false things I had, which were basically, I don't want to be in the Sea Org. The Sea Org is oppressive. I feel like I don't get paid. I feel like the COB doesn't care about me. Like, it was true things. They got her to unbelieve the truth. And so they spent a year. It's called brainwashing, but it's reprogramming. It's thought.
Yeah, it's reprogramming.
Like,
it's
reprogramming.
nasty. It's like in the book 1984, when you're like, room 101, and they keep bringing him in there until like giving him these false injects of information until he finally agrees. Like, that's what it was like for a year and a half. So, it just, I'm going to throw in just a little bit of an anecdote. I'm in the military now, and I've gone through a lot of military training. I'm doing all this as a civilian, completely on my own, like sharing my own personal stories, and I'm in no way representing the military by sharing any of this stuff. So I'll just kind of say that in as a disclaimer. That said, I've gone through a lot of military training, and part of that is survival training, meaning like if you find yourself in a POW situation, what do you do as a POW? Like, as you're in a concentration camp, being interrogated and all this sort of stuff, that training is like 2 weeks long. And, like, you guys are going to be going through all this stuff. It's going to be like 2 weeks long. And I'm like, I think I can pull it
You're
off.
like, Easy. Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah.
It wasn't that training was extremely hard. The physical aspect of that training was very hard. The mental aspect of that was extremely light in comparison to the stuff that I dealt with in Scientology. So the level of indoctrination, like you're put in a much more stressful situation psychologically. It's intense for a good reason, so that they can like show you what to do, but then they give you the tools in order to deal with it. This is that billion-year contract. I mean, honestly, I had signed this contract as a child when I was 10. I think I've signed it multiple times, but they made me sign it again because it's very symbolic. The Sea organization is not actually a real thing. It's almost this constructed identity that they have these members in, and it's like this fraternal organization, but it's not an incorporated organization. So when they actually, if you try to like say, hey, I'm going to sue the Sea organization, that would be like there is no such thing. It's all just an idea and a concept. So it's as all the organizations in their incorporation. Yeah. So every
but
organization is incorporated.
That was changed later. So that's not how it began. These were employment contracts. We were employees when I was in the Sea Org, when I was in the Cadet Org. We were employees. We signed employees. We got pay every week. It was not was stipend, whatever you guys, that we were not religious volunteers. So that all changed when they got that religious status. They changed everything and they reincorporated everything so that it was a non-entity, basically, which is what he's describing.
And a lot of that also came because Mark and Claire Headley brought a lawsuit against them for, basically non-payment of wages and other things. And because they had a kind of a chink in their armor, then they decided like, hey, we're going to turn this they're going to double down on all the religious stuff. So the Sea organization itself is almost like at this point, like a religious brotherhood. But then each one of these organizations that you are in is like its own little organization. So if any one organization got dissolved, it's completely separate from any other organization.
Right,
It is like,
very
it's
insulated.
like a bad Legos block. It's crazy. So they've done a lot of work to insulate themselves, but here's an example of some of the indoctrination. You can see a much younger version of me. This is embarrassing to even show, but this is the truth. We come back. That's a Sea Org motto. Turbo right there on the front left. That is me. This is me.
And look at that dedicated glare in your eye. Like, it's so good. It's so on point to what they would have wanted you to do.
And I just tell you, this so appeals to other kids our age. They use this propaganda so effectively to get other teenagers to join the Sea organization that were public kids, either from Delphi, from these recruitment pools, these grooming pools that we had, Delphi, Apple School, Pumpkin School, kids that were just on course at ASHO or ARLA. Like this was really inspirational, Mike. I'm sorry to tell you.
Well, no, I get it. But, this is this is kind of an interesting conversation, because stolen valor or not stolen valor, because we're actually recording this today on Veterans Day, and I am a military veteran. So they use a lot of symbology in the Sea organization that aligns with this, the Hubbard's fake space Navy shit that he's got going on. But they use the recruitment tool that piggybacks off of a lot of the efforts of the country or multiple countries to market to the younger generation to get them to go into military service. Military service is something that is very short and temporary and is almost like a stepping stone for a lot of people that get into it. And they usually do a tour or two, and not many make a lifestyle out of it. But when if you were a young person and you joined the military, you would kind of get some life skills. And then after that employment contract is over, you go and start your life over.
But you also get like maybe college or something, like you get something out of it.
There's a lot of benefits available.
All these benefits available.
And I'm not trying to pump up the jam on the military, because it's not for everybody. But I will say that the military, they bring you in and they teach you to do a job. They make you do that job and not every job. They bring you in and say, hey, I want to do this job. And you're like, great. They train you to do that job. You do that job. You do well. You get promoted. You get more pay. You get benefits. You're able to do college. If you want to stay in, you can, or you can leave at the end of your contract. And it's very, you're used by the organization in the military, but the intent is never to keep you forever. But the intent of a Sea Org member is to keep you forever. And at a young age, you don't even know what you're signing up for.
No idea. You have no idea. I will say as well, this symbology in the things that they say as well, they pull from, in these promotional things, they pull from Owen Hubbard's writings. And this slogan, "We come back," is the motto of the Sea organization.
Right.
Now, so we come back. What does that mean? That means that we've lived before and we've come back again to perform these duties. So whether were Scientologists in the previous lifetime, Sea members in the previous lifetime, or just in fact we come back. So we come back again and again. We've got a duty to uphold. And so this is something that other Sea Org members would be like, "Oh, welcome back, shipmate," or stuff like that to us kids, because when we would join the Sea Org, there was this belief that we were already Sea Org members before, and also with that additional responsibility. Well, you should know how to just be a Sea Org member because you did it all before. Like you're
You're
fully
signing
fledged.
you're signing billion-year contracts, and we live multiple lives, and you're just going to regain those abilities. And so all of those things play into this crazy story that he's building, that we come back. Yes.
Yeah. So, and then along with that, especially for the public or the civilian Scientologist children, a lot of them are it's implied to them that there's a good possibility that you probably were a Scientologist before this lifetime. You
Oh
might be a
yeah,
past life clear, like all that whole, like the things that you would hear the kids then talking about it.
totally.
Listen to this propaganda in here. We come back. It's not the
Hmm.
first time you've been part of the elite. Feel the weight of the sword in your hand as you raise it high. The fiery rush of pride that's been resting in your soul will remind you. This isn't the first time we've been together. Welcome home, shipmate. The Sea Org.
Mm.
Many are called, few are chosen. Like as a kid that's
It,
trying to establish your
uh,
identity with your indoctrinated ass civilian Scientologist parents that are like spending all their money on that. And then you have these recruiters that are trying to like recruit you into this stuff. Like, is this not like overly suggestive and sensational as you're trying to figure out what to do with yourself? Meanwhile, like the other options are to like run around loose, like free range in Los Angeles. Like,
No, you can be a
no.
prostitute. You can work at Burger King. You can, let's see,
yeah,
what else? You can hook on Hollywood Boulevard. Like, what were the other things that we were
drug
You can get
addicts.
cancer. You
Yeah,
can be a drug addict. Like, those are the
yeah,
options. You can do
yeah.
this or you can do that.
And
And,
also,
and,
this
And
is the
also,
elite. Yeah, this is the elite core. Many are called, few are chosen. You could maybe be one of the chosen ones. I
it's such
mean,
a sales pitch. So much of Scientology is such a sales pitch. So they're trying to create this value. They're constantly trying to create this value. They're trying to reinforce and get you to confirm that you got all these things out of these things that you did, and it's exclusive and it's incredible, and not everyone gets to do it. It's just straight up sales pitch. Like it's all PR and marketing.
yeah.
well, and what is the complete hobby horse with hating on people that flip burgers? I love burgers. I was
Oh, me
if
too. Love a
now
burger.
that I'm in my 40s, I can't mess around with burgers the way that I want to. But like we were
The
all
way that
told, you'll be
you
flipping burgers. Like after I worked there for so long, I wish I was freaking flipping burgers. Like, oh, like man, oh man, I'm so glad that David Miscavige threatened to beat the shit out of me today. At least I'm not flipping burgers. Like,
it was one of those sayings. It was so weird because it didn't really mean anything. What it implied was that you're not going to be any better. You're not going to have whatever you're aspiring to. There's a limit on your ability to achieve that. If you leave here, you're not going to have any
you're
great
not going to amount to
aspirations.
anything.
You're not
Yeah, you won't be
exactly
homo
the same.
novus. You'll be
Yeah. So, like at PAC, I remember like the security guards, like we're not, because I was often on the decks for like a period of 2 years, and the security guards would say that they just like you get into the elevator with them because you just happen to all pile in the elevator at the same time, and then they just be like looking you up and down, and just be like, yeah, because you're in your civvy clothes, right, and they're in uniform, and they're like, yeah, you're just gonna be flipping burgers at Burger King. And it made you feel like shit. And even though the words, that's what I'm trying to say, is like, even though the words don't really mean what you think they're supposed to mean, it's very belittling and degrading. And
Oh, no
it's the
doubt.
equivalent of saying you'll never amount to anything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're going to be flipping burgers, when you could be here scrubbing floors. Like when you try
Right.
to apply like actual logic to it and like take yourself out of the situation and look at it, you're like, this is stupid. Like, what's going on?
I think I'm gonna go flip burgers. Yeah. So these
Yeah.
kids are all second. These are all second gens. These are all young. Miriam's here in the bottom left. With your
Yeah.
brother? Yes. Okay.
That's
Top
my brother
left
Ben and
is
I, our first York day.
yes.
Yeah.
See your
Oh.
day.
Yeah.
You
We're
don't have any pears
swampers.
or
Our first York
applets because
day.
you're swamp.
No.
Alaska Paris, top left. And this is I don't know her name, Mo Bolstad's twin sister over here on the right. So I grabbed these pictures because they
Marine.
all happen to be
Marine Bolstad.
or yeah, so but her sister, she finally got out.
Corinne.
She's out.
Corinne Bolstad.
Corinne. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's out. I'm so happy. Anyway, these people that they're using as model
So
examples are
Corinne was constantly trying to get off that int base. Like this woman was always under security watch because she wanted out of there so bad. It's really hard to get out of that int base because you're so connected to the inner sanctum of everything. But I just remember her constantly being under security watch, trying to leave. That's the main. I don't remember her in any other capacity than that. I know she had a lot of other capacities, but I just remember how much she wanted to get the hell out of there. That's if I could
and
say one
Mo
thing.
was being able she was like forced to do I think the Pura for 5 years or something crazy like that and ended up having all these medical issues, like real medical issues caused by malnutrition and all sorts of things. So still suffering from that. And that's her twin sister. And she escaped and her sister was trapped and her sister's finally out.
So while the other two sort of sets of photos are like from publications, they're what the Sea Org wants you to see. Our one down the bottom left is not. That's just like it's another kid who's in the Sea Org taking a photo of us, and you can see we've blurred out the faces, but the two kids behind. See that short kid? He was like 11 years old. I'm 13. My brother here is 14. And this was the time. You see how we're all swampers. It was when a whole bunch of us kids were brought from the ranch to join the Sea Org all at one time. So this is our first Sea Org day. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out. They're not going to show that in a publication because like we're all swampers. Like that's not something that you want to aspire to. We don't have any gold. We don't have any chains on us. And so that's not
These are
something.
real photos that were snuck out. But also too, is this like when they were just prior to ending the ranches and stuff? So they were like pushing out all these kids, sending them out on
This was about, I want to say 1.5 to 2 years before they did the final. Yeah.
housekeeping, house cleaning, whatever. Okay.
Mhm.
Next
Yeah.
slide.
Yeah.
Arming the
Golden
troops.
Era Productions. So after I decided that I was going to drink all of the Kool-Aid, I then eventually was working here. There's a bunch of people in this photo, and this is pretty much the entire staff. I would say probably around 1997, 98 timeframe is when this photo is likely from. There's one reason why I'm not in this photo. The gentleman in the very front center, his name is Steve Willett. I was basically his deputy or his second in command, which is his organizing officer. And he was the commanding officer of Golden Era Productions. Probably right before this photo was taken, I was promoted to RTC and I was working directly under Marty Rathman as an RTC trainee, basically to become an ethics officer and enforcer for RTC. And then I was also being groomed and trained to be COB's driver. I eventually got kicked out of RTC because of a bunch of things that happened. Neither here nor there, but this is Golden Era Productions, and this again, arming the troops. So the idea, what Golden Era Productions actually does, is create the audio, visual, and printed and spoken word for L. Ron Hubbard and all the things that are now being, I think, produced by the publications organizations they have down in Los Angeles. But Golden Era Productions was creating these things, and the manufacturing building 36 is right behind this photo that's being taken. And the idea of arming the troops is providing the organizations with the L. Ron Hubbard things to sell, the books, the lectures, the CDs, all that sort of stuff is the e-meters. This was being provided by Gold, but just look at the again, the symbolism and the copy. Like we're in our Space Navy uniforms and we're arming the troops. Like, I
Like
mean,
what?
sounds like a church.
It's so confusing. It's very mixed
No,
messages,
it sounds
isn't
like
it?
weapons. I just think, what?
Yeah.
There's weapons here? You guys are making weapons for the troops that are out there? I see Jeff Hawkins. I see Romina Nunnally. And I think I might also see Liz Ferris's dad over Romina Nunnally's left shoulder with the big glasses. Do
Let's
you
see.
know
Let me.
Liz? Do you know Bob Ferris that
Oh, I
was
know
at
Bob Ferris very
All-Based?
well. I worked
Was that
with Bob.
him?
Let me see.
Kind
Where's
of.
Romina?
So Romina's behind the woman that you said was married to Mark Fisher. So short woman, go back. Romina's right behind her, couple
Oh
rows.
yeah.
And
Yeah. That's
then
Ferris.
top,
So yep. If you
is
go
that Bob
basically,
Ferris?
yeah, two heads up from Romina is that
Mm-hmm.
blonde dude right there in the middle with the glasses. That is 100% Bob Ferris.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's
And
an
then
elderly citizen, just like your mom, that is trapped there.
My mom is in there somewhere, but I can't. I haven't spotted her.
Is she?
But she was at Gold. Still is
she
at
most
Gold.
definitely
Was there
was.
in those? Yeah, that time period. Yeah.
I remember, and I know that your mother is probably one of the worst examples of an absentee mother that was not there for her children. I
Mhm.
remember working with your mother because I was a person running around trying to get orders completed, and your mother was always one of the artists. She's a very pleasant, hardworking woman, and I have
Mhm.
nothing but good memories of her. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I don't want to say that to diminish the fact of how absolutely unavailable she was as a mother. But
Yeah.
I remember if I, she's very pleasant to talk to. She's hardworking. And I remember sometimes she would just work all night, even if she didn't
Mhm.
have to. Like
Even if she
you're
didn't
an
have
indoctrinator.
to.
Yeah,
Jesus.
she was,
Yes.
but I think, sometimes as an artist, I do some stuff like some creative things. Sometimes as an artist, you get in the flow and you just never want to stop. That coupled
Totally.
with the C organizations, uh, propensity to work around the clock is,
Mhm.
if you just provide them with coffee constantly and stimulants and all that, they'll just work and work and work. I can remember your mother would work around the clock often, and sometimes she would look like she needed to go home and get a shower and change her clothes and get some sleep.
A couple things come to mind. My aunts speak about my mother as being tunnel vision. That's how they described her. And that when she would go into a project, she would go into it wholeheartedly. And it was as if everything else in the background disappeared. Now, unfortunately, that also meant that her child at the time, because she had a child um, with a different father. So my half brother and I, we had different fathers. And he was the first of us. But so she would be in a painting project and she would forget he was there in the room having a nap. Go off and get some milk to make a cup of coffee or something and just forget. And so then there's an incident where he wandered across. He went out looking for her. He was 3 years old. He got out and wandered across a busy highway. So so she was tunnel visioned. Everything else around her disappeared. And then I also found on a message board that she was the most gung ho staff member that they knew. I think at that time she was in a class 5 org, Adelaide org. The other thing is that I also have my memories of her when she would come on, like we would sometimes wake up at the Wilcox and she would just be there asleep. Wouldn't know. We never knew when she would show up. And there would be like months in between, but then suddenly we'd wake up in the morning and she'd be there. Um, and so oftentimes it was very hard to wake her in the morning because she was so like almost comatose tired. And so then I gather from that the lack of sleep. She also loved coffee. She drank coffee all the time. She loved coffee with honey. That's how she had it,
Mm.
with milk and honey. And she yeah, and so I think so I understood that there was a huge part of this, her being at Gold and this ultra laser focused type of environment where she could just do, fulfill these two things, the art and this following of this. I think it's like a survivor, it's a survivor mission is what I've come across in the book as it was described. But basically, because she had her own trauma, it makes sense. She was dragged to a psychiatric ward. Her husband at the time, who was very volatile, threatened to have her, you know, held against her will, and the admitting person refused. So it was only just fortunate. She believes she was only just fortunate because that person knew someone was associated with Scientology. At the time, there was this huge, in Australia especially, huge anti-psychiatry movement. And anyway, so all this, it all makes sense. Like for her, this is the place that she wants to be. She doesn't want to leave there. I would have to, if I even cared to, I would have to drag her literally kicking and screaming. This is 100% what she wants to do. And the other thing I'll add to that is that when she was at Gold, she had originally gone to do these paintings, do this series of paintings that are in the L. Ron Hubbard Life exhibition. But then it was supposed to be for only just a temporary period of time. But then she just never came back to Australia. And she left a 1.5-year-old. My youngest brother was 1.5 years. I was about 4, around there. Then my brother was 5. And so she left all of us there. But then she called my father at some stage, I think after she'd been there for like 1.5 years, so quite some time. And she said, either you make it go right to come here or that's it. As in, she was no longer going to be associated with him or the children. It's all over, done. Like, I'm here. So it was all about, I'm here. You do what I'm doing or else.
Right.
And the same thing was with my older half brother who eventually, so when she joined the Sea Org, so going back a little bit, he grows up with her. She's a single parent and he has a lot of incredibly rough and heartbreaking experiences. She is more and more involved and taken by Scientology. And then when he is about 15, she joins the Sea Org in Sydney and starts to have us babies. Then later when she goes to Los Angeles, he's like, well, can I come with you? And she was like, no, like you don't, like you're not my child. If you don't want to do the Sea Org or Scientology, like that's it. And that's just how she was. So yeah.
It's unfortunate. I mean, I think because she was extremely talented artist, like not a little bit talented, like talented to the point where she could make a very successful living for herself and whatever family she wanted if she chose to. And then with that, the artists were kind of love bombed a little bit, but also worked to death by Miscavige.
Yeah.
In that, like the way you love bomb somebody in the Sea Org, is you give them a bullshit rank that doesn't actually give them any benefits or any additional pay. She was, I think if I remember properly, she was an ensign. And that is like one thin stripe. And she was an officer and, just like there a little bit of the status that she had there. But I remember her being the kind of person, if you came in and said, hey, we're going to completely have to redo everything that you've been spending a month on, and we're now going in this other direction and we need to start working on it immediately.
She would do it.
Because these things would happen. She would just be like, okay, let's go. Where everyone else would be like, fuck. She would never be like,
yeah. So Mike, 100%. I have a memory of her. Again, we wake up in the, at the Wilcox and then she's there. It's like, oh, mom, yay. Now as shortly after she had sort of like, gotten up or whatever, she had pulled out this art piece and she was just straight onto it. And it was actually with, it must have been like making a design for something that would then be whatever. But like, it was this religious scene, like a Catholic kind of religious scene, very detailed. And she had, like artist markers and she was coloring it all in and stuff like that. And I was sort of just like waiting for her to like stop doing what she's doing and like, be my mom. But anyways, she was like, oh no, I can't stop. I gotta keep going because David Miscavige, we'd done this whole project and then he just scrapped the whole thing and now we're starting from scratch. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, that is so accurate. Everything that you're saying is accurate to how I remember everything of her.
And
She
remember,
was very cheerful demeanor, always a smile. She couldn't really talk about anything real. Yeah.
and I wish it wasn't that way, but I mean, a pleasant person, but at the same time, like you said, the chance of her leaving, given the opportunity, she would probably, I don't see her ever leaving there unless she had that, and that's both true and untrue. The reason people leave that property and everything they've dedicated themselves to is at a certain point, everybody has a threshold of the amount of bullshit they can put up with and the amount that they can be treated badly. And then they will like, the programming will break. It's going to be harder for other people. I saw your mother is very dedicated, but I don't know that it would be never. I think that she could be If she's not being properly taken care of and, being provided the things that make her happy, she could decide at some point, I've had enough of this, because other artists that were probably similar to her in the way that they were
Mhm.
dedicated to that actually did leave. So,
Well, here's the thing, Mike. Here's where I'll disagree.
okay.
Her life as an artist before the C organization, you know how you noted on at that success level that she could have attained? She never did.
Yeah.
She never did because
Mhm.
she was not a business person. She could perform great artworks, and great artworks take time. They take months and years, especially she did oil paintings. These are projects that take a very long time with little pay, right? So she was not thriving. My brother talks about how, the car would break down all the time and he would have to push when he was a little kid. This is my half brother. And he's passed away. I realized I said he talks about, and no, he talked about. Anyways, so my half brother has talked about how he would have to get out of the car with her and push the car along because it had broken down. She was just barely getting by, scraping by, was in near poverty the way that they were living. And so she never amounted to that success. But in the Sea Org and in Scientology, she was successful. She did attain that level of success that she wanted for
Right.
herself. And all of her letters back to him would say over the years would be how successful she is. So she loved that success. The other thing is that in order to sustain a life as an artist, you still need to do all the normal domestic things. You need to cook your meals. You need to, just to stay alive, and you need to pay your rent and all these things, right? And I don't think any of those things were ever for her. She's never cooked me a meal my entire life. So this is never. No what? She's never
Yeah.
cooked me a meal. This is legitimate. So she's not a domestic kind of person. She's not someone that could survive in a real world environment. And she didn't. She struggled with one child. She then had 3 children after that, but we were all born in the Sea Org. So, the Sea Org life really suited her. She could offload the problem of the kids, the responsibility of the
Mhm.
kids straight away. And she was left to just purely dedicate herself to her work, which is the one thing that she loved to do was the art. And this
Yeah.
is and it doesn't matter. Everything else could fall away in her life. As long as she could continue doing her art, which the Sea Org will allow her to do, um, it fulfills everything for her. So there
Well, I
is
don't
no
disagree.
amount
Yeah.
of right.
I don't
There is
disagree
no
with
amount
anything you
of
said there.
so let's say that the one thing, the tipping point could be if they took the art away. That would be if she wasn't
Mm.
able to do art, how
If
would she
she ended
survive?
up on if she ended up on some sort of like drone job, like, scrubbing dishes or something like
In
that.
the galley,
But
yeah.
if
Mhm.
I would say that she's probably had to do that, but it was always be like,
Yes,
you need to make penance so you can get back to your job.
so that you can get back.
And right.
100%.
So
Yeah,
I
100%.
I think you are correct. I don't disagree with you on that. I very much hope that I am correct someday, strictly so that you can have this conversation with her for your sake,
Mhm,
not for hers.
mhm, mhm.
So that's what I hope.
I
We'll
appreciate
see.
that. Thank you. I
Can
appreciate.
I feel like Mike Render acknowledged that he was the one that brought her over, and he had no idea she had children because who gives a shit who has children or obligations? And then 2, my mother was in the Sea Org off and on, and she was just that dedicated, and I think it takes a lot of people. My mom had to go psychotic before she left Scientology, and other people
Mhm.
have to come to a pain point that is so extreme that they just can't tolerate it anymore, and until they get to that point, they
Mhm.
just exist there. So,
Yeah. It's
I
unfortunate.
don't know. It's
Yeah,
really
and the people that
unfortunate.
will be kept there will be the people that, don't backlash. Then who basically, when
Yeah.
she said like they come in with a new order, she's like, "Okay, let's make it go right." And the thing
Yeah.
is that the
It's
more
just
that she
dedicated to it.
right, and the more
Mhm.
compliant she is, the more time she gets to dedicate to art. Because if she does kick up a stink, then she gets to do a punishment program that takes away from her
Becomes
art. So of course,
uncomfortable and then might
yeah.
make her wanna leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she will, yeah, yeah. But I
And that
appreciate you saying that. I wanted to add one thing, Mike.
sure.
Mm.
Thank you so much for saying that. The one thing that it was so important for me to learn. As I said, I evolved, my relationship evolved from her. First, when I was little, when my father first said that I was going to LA to be with our mother, I didn't recall who my mother was, what she looked like, what she felt like, what she sounded like. And so that was a real worry for me. we arrive in LA and I get put in, I do meet her at the airport. We spend 24 hours or a couple days together, and then I get put in the CEO. And then from there, it's like, it's every few months or whatever that I see her. But I still had that huge hero kind of, idea about her. Admired her very much, very, very much. Just thought she was just incredible, amazing, not looking at anything factual. Anyways, but as I became into adulthood and I questioned and I started to get angry, and I was going through counseling. And yes, the one thing that was so important for me to be told by my counselor was, she said, because I was like, I just want this relationship with her. I just want to have these conversations. And I had tried and tried. And the responses that my mother had given were even more damaging in a way, like even more heartbreaking. Just to, it's like, you're questioning why she sacrificed so much. And you're trying to say, like, this hurt me. And she says, yeah, I know, not recognizing your pain, but she's like, yeah, I made that decision and I'm happy with it. And I'm sticking to it. And I'm not, and you're just like, there's no reflection from her. Anyway, but the counselor said to me, do you think she is capable of having this relationship that you want with her? And that was where I was like, oh. So at that turning point, I no longer thought it was a failing on my part or something that she didn't understand about my experiences. I understood that she wasn't capable. And so my expectation of her completely changed. And from that moment forward, I didn't feel the need, though I still tried in some ways, I didn't feel the need of that I had to have that because she wasn't capable of it. That was really important. And that's something I do want, if anyone else is listening to this and has that similar kind of fracturing of that parental relationship, just to know it was never your fault. It was never a lacking on your part. They lacked the whole way through. It was their lacking. Yeah. And in the end, if you can realize that and understand that, then the heartbreak does ease,
That's an excellent point. Thank you for sharing that.
Trafficking of children involves recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, receipt of children for the purpose of exploitation. Child exploitation may involve forced labor, slavery, servitude, debt bondage. Child labor is a form of work that may be hazardous to the physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development of children, and it can interfere with education, development, and psychological well-being. If you or someone that you know has been human trafficked, help is available. There will be more information at the end of this presentation. Thank you.